Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Unrestricted Sports. Today we are talking about how greatness is measured. So, who's the GOAT? Well, obviously it's Tom Brady, but we're going to be talking about how greatness is really measured for football players and really, kind of discuss that, see what we think, and hopefully it's going to be an interesting conversation here.
So, can we agree that greatness for an NFL player, majority of the time, I'll say 90% of the time, is measured by how many Super Bowls they won?
100%.
Okay,
Super
cool.
Bowls it's a lot easier to judge by rings than it is in football than it is in basketball. Because in basketball, rings are just kind of part of it. Rings aren't really the determining factor because there's a lot of guys who weren't as great as, say, LeBron, who have more rings than LeBron. That's just a fact. Some of these guys who have more rings than LeBron would paint circles around on the court. But the fact of the matter is that they have those rings. So I think it's a different scenario when you're talking about football in terms of ring.
I would like to point out, although greatness is defined by rings, it doesn't mean that there aren't great players that don't have rings.
Yeah, that's true too.
Quarterback, Dan Marino, Sid Luckman. Running back, Barry Sanders, Eric Dickerson. Wide receiver, Calvin Johnson, Randy Moss, Terrell Owens, Brian Urlacher, Dick Butkus. Plenty of good players that never won a ring, but should have. Honestly,
this is the way I sort of think about it. Greatness is measured primarily by the rings, and that's how it should be in football. For reasons we've already discussed. Rings are kind of like if you're going to, a pay to get in sort of food buffet sort of deal. You pay your $5 to get in, and then anything extra that isn't covered by that, you have to pay for. Rings are that $5 that gets you in. Then after that, your stats, how you were as a teammate, all those sort of things are like the extra stuff that you can get once you're in. Would you agree with that, or do you disagree?
I would agree that in football, if there ever is to be a debate for who the greatest of all time is, I would say they would have to have a similar amount of rings to Tom Brady.
That they'd have to have at least as many.
No. Because if you have 100%,
they need as many.
If you have two less rings than Tom Brady, but you consistently have 4,000 yard passing seasons with at least a 90 QBR. Come on.
Joe Montana had 4 Super Bowl rings. No one considers him the GOAT anymore. They consider him a close second or third.
Third.
But you know what I mean. Rings are so much more determining in football because getting to the Super Bowl at all is way harder than it is to get to the NBA Finals. The Super Bowl is like one of the hardest out of all the major sports. I think football has the lowest percentage number of teams coming into the playoffs. Even with the new changes to the playoffs where they're adding one more team each, that is still the case. So rings are so much more important. And then you have to consider the fact that not only did Brady get 6 rings, he also went to 9 Super Bowls and barely lost those 2 of them because of pure crazy Eli Manning level luck that no one really understands how it even happened because it was so lucky. And then he lost to Nick Foles in a game where he set the record for passing and touchdowns and single-handedly scored every single one of their points. So no one can really beat that if they don't have 6 rings. They're going to have 6 rings to get to the table. To knock Tom Brady off on top of that, with all of his statistical and how Tom Brady is viewed as a teammate, his stats, all that, they'd need at least 6 to even get close.
That's fair.
That's before you even mention everything Tom Brady is off the field in terms of his preparation, his like supreme desire to win and motivate his teammates in a way that doesn't make them hate him.
See, I don't
that
like
actually make them.
I don't like that side of arguing who's the GOAT. How he is off the field. Like he's not. We're not arguing greatest of all time quarterbacks off the field. This is strictly
that is
football.
That is a big part of it. If you have a quarterback,
it's a factor.
If you have a quarter,
but it shouldn't be the determining.
Well, yes,
factor.
that's the point. It's an additional factor after you get to the table with rings.
But it's not that big of a deal. You could have a shitty.
If someone had 4 rings, but they weren't as great statistically as Tom Brady, and they weren't
hypothetically, if Johnny Manziel,
they were maybe.
Hypothetically, if Johnny just listen. Hypothetically, if Johnny Manziel won 6 Super Bowl rings, but did a bunch of illegal activity off the field, steroids, weed in some states,
if he was doing,
he would still be a great quarterback. I use Johnny Manziel because he's horrible off the field.
All right. Yes, that's fair. Johnny Manziel, if he won 6 rings, would be considered one of the greatest quarterbacks to play the game. However, would he beat Tom Brady? The answer is no. Even if he, now in this case that you're saying that this guy's a complete terrible person.
Yeah.
You're even enhancing the bad traits of Johnny Manziel to do so. But this person wouldn't beat out Tom Brady if they were to talk about it. Who's the GOAT? Well, they both have the same number of rings, so let's look at the other stuff. Johnny Manziel, even if he won 6 Super Bowl rings, wouldn't have better stats than Brady. That's just not very likely, especially not considering that Tom Brady plays a lot outside. Combine that with the fact that Tom Brady has been like the poster child of good behavior for the NFL, and combine that with the fact that there's not a single guy I've ever heard who's played with Tom Brady who says they don't like him. Even his competition liked him. Ruthless defensive players who were known for being ruthless liked playing against Tom Brady because he pushed them to the limit of what they could do. So, I mean, that wouldn't even be a question. So, to beat Tom Brady, the only way I would say that he's going to get knocked off is if someone gets to 6 rings. They at least have to get to 6 rings, and then after doing so, once they get those 6 rings, they're going to have stats that are at least comparable, and to knock Brady off, they'd have to be better.
I would entertain the argument that Dan Marino is a close second to Tom Brady with 0 rings. I would entertain the argument. I'm not saying I would agree with it, but I'd listen. Dan Marino's stats are good enough, but yes, like you said, rings are the determining factor.
But didn't they they got blown out in that Super Bowl they lost, didn't they? Wasn't it 38-14?
Yeah, it was bad.
Tom Brady's never been blown out in the Super Bowl. He's lost by all of his losses have been by very small numbers.
I mean, you want to talk getting blown out in the Super Bowl?
All right, what's blown out in the Super Bowl?
All right, last episode or a couple episodes ago, we were talking Peyton Manning, top 5 quarterback. Didn't he play against the Seahawks and lose by they only scored 3 points that game?
All right.
And then the next Super Bowl they win. Hey man, it's possible.
There needs to be some context here. That was a wildly anomaly-based game.
The Seahawks one or the Panthers one?
No, the one where they got blown out.
Well, okay. The Seahawks were a very good team.
Yes, defensively.
Exactly.
But here's the thing, though. People were expecting a good defensive showing from the Seahawks more than they were expecting an offensive. They were expecting the Legion of Boom to come out big. They were also expecting Peyton Manning to come out big. When Dan Marino played Joe Montana in the Super Bowl that they got blown out in, it wasn't a one side's going to do better than the other because everyone knew that it was either going to be that Peyton Manning would embarrass the Legion of Doom or that they were going to absolutely destroy Peyton Manning. That was the only way that people saw it.
Yeah.
They knew that it was going to be one or the other.
Yeah.
When Joe Montana played Dan Marino, they were expecting it to be a shootout, high-scoring game that one or the other would just barely beat out the other person in terms of touchdowns, passing yards. And I mean, obviously at the time it wasn't the biggest thing, but they were still expecting that one of the quarterbacks would clearly win, even if it was but they weren't expecting it to be a big thing. They were expecting it to be a marginal thing, right?
Right.
But that wasn't the case. Dan Marino got clearly outplayed by Joe Montana. And they were both playing offensively, so it's not like anyone expected that to happen like they did with the Seahawks and Broncos game, because they expected that one of the other sides was going to shut the other one down, because that's the only way it could go, right?
Right.
So I think in that regards, that blowout is different than the blowout than Marino had.
See, getting back on topic though, I think it's hard to say that getting blown out in a Super Bowl proves you're not great. It's just the 49ers.
It's part of that clutch gene.
And I didn't watch. I haven't watched Dan Marino's Super Bowl game against the 49ers, but it could have been just either a bad outing by Dan Marino. Dolphins defense didn't play well. 49ers offense was clicking. We don't know what it really was.
That is 100% true. But the simple fact remains that some people didn't have that happen to them. Tom Brady, like I said, Tom Brady has never been blown out in a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
The closest that ever came to happening was 28-3, which actually ended up being the most impressive game, I think, of any football player's career.
Right.
For everyone, and I would say that for everyone who was involved in that game, because that was an impressive game to win.
Impressive for the Patriots, specifically, not the Falcons. Not everybody in that game.
Not everyone looked spectacular with that. No. But so going back on topic though, like you said, there's also that clutch factor with determining it. So to beat out Tom Brady as the GOAT, they're going to have at least 6 Super Bowl rings, and to beat Tom Brady out, they would also have to have 6, or they'd have to have better stats. They'd either have to have 6 rings and better stats, or 7 rings and only slightly worse stats. That's the only way that it's going to work out.
See, I think
and then to add in the durability factor. Tom Brady is incredibly durable.
Yeah.
Then add in the fact that you have to consider the clutch gene that Tom Brady has. No one's ever going to get. I don't think anyone will ever get close to that again. At least not while I'm alive.
Yeah.
So those are the only 2 scenarios that Tom Brady can be knocked off: 6 rings and better stats, or 7 rings and only slightly worse stats.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole bunch of other minimal things that they'd have to be better at too, obviously. But that's part of being the greatest.
Yeah.
They'd have to be better than Tom Brady at most things. If not all.
Closing point, I think, is what separates greats. Obviously rings, but for Tom Brady specifically, and I know we talk a lot about Tom Brady, but that's just because he is the gold standard for quarterback, is Tom Brady's seen it all in Super Bowls. He's seen offensive dominance. He's seen his defense dominate. He's seen terrible performances in the first half, 28-3, prime example.
And then he's always done his job in making sure they win those games.
And like you said, the Rams he does what's necessary to win. The Falcons Super Bowl, he got enough points to get them the lead in the second half. They won that game. Super Bowl, whatever it was, where they played the Rams offense was trash. Tom Brady only had to put up so many points.
Exactly.
And then he just had to burn clock on the field. That's all that mattered.
I would like to point this out to people, that once again, Tom Brady wasn't going to go around slinging the ball when a lot of his guys were kind of getting towards the end of the season. Towards the end of the season, your guys are pretty banged up. No one wants to get hurt. Even if you're in the Super Bowl, no one wants to get hurt. But Tom Brady sees that, well, the Rams aren't scoring any points. I'm not going to make risky throws that get my players hurt, trying to force completion that we don't really need. If I need to throw it away, I'll throw it away because we're up and the Rams aren't scoring. And Jared Goff is completely shell-shocked because he was poorly prepared. and that wasn't any fault of Jared Goff's. Jared Goff did not know what he was getting into.
Right. I think
he was a young.
I think
the coaching staff completely underprepared him, and that's not to no fault of his own.
Right. I think before we get into too much of Brady and Belichick, I think Brady has so much knowledge of what he needs to do that in that Rams Super Bowl specifically, he knew not waste time, but manage time in a way that chews clock. And then you get Belichick's elite defense out there, and that's all you need. You don't have to waste time or chance a fumble from a running back or an awkward interception or a sack fumble, anything stupid.
Yeah. That's exactly the point.
It might not have been the most exhilarating Super Bowl, but the players aren't there to make it enjoyable. They're there to win.
Yeah. You might say, oh, well, it's the survivability of the league that the league needs to be in. Yeah. Who's going to stop watching football? If the next 3 Super Bowls ended in defensive battles, which, by the way, if you can't appreciate a defensive battle, you're just here for the points. You're not really appreciating the whole game, first of all. Secondly, if you're not really going to act as though if the next 3 Super Bowls were defensive battles, like I was saying, you're not going to stop watching football. We all know that. So stop pretending that you would, because you wouldn't.
Right.
You wouldn't. That's a simple fact. You enjoy football. Even if it's a defensive battle, deep down you are enjoying yourself while at least watching it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I definitely agree with that.
That's that.
All right, I think that's all I have to say on
that's
this
all I have
topic.
to say as well.
So thank you guys for listening.
Make sure you guys leave your comments down below. Feel free to add your 2 cents. Make sure you guys follow Unrestricted Sports at all of our social media down in the description below. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Help the channel grow a little bit. And we'll see you guys next episode. See you.